It is documented, musty, weathered, ancient sentiment essence so deep, bursting with a concoction of meaning, the nitty-gritty of which hides in a labyrinth. Yet it breaks out in perpetuum, vibrant and animated.
Let us stare, deep and long. Only a black sun will return its gaze, an oath to the world written on the back of forests. Tongues in stone inside eyes and lips of snakes, where no mortals roam. Throw arrows in silver and gold. Our wisdom is a detached cloak, its envy inscribed in the secret whispers from strangers.
Welcome to Meet the Poet with me, Florrie Crass, where today I will be in discussion with two poets. We have one of Homestage's own, a Meet the Poet returner, Darren J Beaney, who is part of the poetry collective called Flight of the Dragonfly. He has released 2 poetry pamphlets and he is now onto his first collection, which will be coming out soon. And our second guest is Matt Duggan, who is a newcomer to Homestage and to Meet the Poet, but by no means a newcomer to poetry or inexperienced in any way at all. He has released 4 pamphlets, 2 collections. I think he's onto his 3rd collection now. He's got lots of fantastic poetry to share with you all. It's a fantastic hour ahead. We've got poetry ranging from politics to the pandemic, love to historical stories. There's so much to get you thinking and to entertain you. I really hope you enjoy. Welcome to Meet the Poet, Matt, and welcome back to Darren, who has obviously been on Meet the Poet with us before. It is wonderful to have you both here. So a question that I do like to ask everyone who comes on Meet the Poet, just to get the ball rolling, is how did you get into poetry? And let's start with Darren. You have answered this question before, but let's hear the rendition again in case we've got newcomers or people just need a refresher of how you got into poetry.
Okay, I probably can't make it any fancier than it was before. So mid-90s, I was in a pretty low place, not very well mental health wise, some issues around dependency and substance dependency, and just heard Simon Armitage reading a poem called Hitcher on the radio one night. I was just completely taken with it and its content and what it was about. And I just, having never studied English properly as a kid and not bothered with poetry and thought it was all flowery language and Shakespearean stuff, just to hear this really modern out there poem, I was just taken with it. So heard another couple of poems that night on the radio that he read. The next day went and bought the collection that the poem was in, loved it, and then just discovered some more modern poets, and then just felt, actually I'm going to just write down what's going on in my head, and it will. And it proved, as many people have said, poetry is cathartic. It proved to be cathartic. It was part of a healing process, and I think that was 1994, and since then I've written lots and lots, read lots of poetry, written many poems, most of them awful, some of them reasonably good, and then recently did a master's in creative writing, which has helped me develop no end. So that's how I got into it.
Amazing. And how about you, Matt? How did you find your way into the poetry world?
I started writing love poems for girls at school, and
how a lot of people begin, isn't it?
And I used to send them to girls in the classroom, and with some success and some not very good success, but and I suppose it went from there. But then it was in 1989 that I sat down with my dad and my mum. We sat down and watched V, the film poem by Tony Harrison, and that absolutely blew my mind completely to what poetry can actually be. I know it's political, and I think some poetry should be political. There's no point scurrying about sort of saying, oh no, this isn't happening. You need to face up to the realities of life and the realities of politics. And V, even if you read that poem today, it's still very, very poignant to what's happening. especially with the rise in sort of far right, etc.
I haven't
And then after that, really, I just started submitting poems to magazines. A lot of rejections to begin with, but then I worked and eventually started to get some acceptances. I then entered the Arabati Prize for Poetry in 2015, and to my surprise, I won. So, and that's my journey in a few words.
Thank you. I mean, I haven't actually read V, so I might go and take a look at it after this. But yeah, it's really interesting to hear that. I mean, so many people have different stories about how they get into it, and really interesting to find out. And I mean, let's go to our first reading, which will be from Darren. But before we actually hear the poems, just have a couple of questions. So this, the what you're going to be reading from is The Machinery of Life. Now, when you spoke with us the first time, you read from Honeydew, which was your debut pamphlet. I wondered, what are the similarities or the differences between these two pamphlets? Like, how do they relate to each other, if they do at all?
Well, they're both collections of poems about love. I think the first one, Honeydew, was quite a lot of reflection on my relationship with Jo, my wife, and how that's developed over time. The Machinery of Life really is more thoughts and reflections on what love is. And most of the poems in the pamphlet were written for my master's dissertation. The working title, well, the original title for that was "What is Love?" and what does it mean to blokes, and what does poetry mean to blokes, and that was that. But because it was an academic dissertation which had poetry as part of it, I had to do some reading and some research, and actually some of the poems came about from the reading that I did, and some came about from the interviews I did with a load of guys about what love is and what poetry is. So there's both pamphlets about love, but slightly different journeys, takes on the concept of what love is.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm excited to hear from it. I'll hand over to you for your first reading.
Thanks, Rory. This one's called What is Love? It is documented, musty, weathered, ancient sentiment essence so deep, bursting with a concoction of meaning, the nitty-gritty of which hides in a labyrinth. Yet it breaks out in perpetuum, vibrant and animated. It pedals round the earth, preying on the blushing, crafty cat burglar, stealing hearts for pure pleasure. Silent assailant, plundering and destroying. You may stare it in the face for an age before finally putting 1 + 1 together. I remember sighting it in a flash, a day-glow acidic angel dancing on bubbles. It feeds simply off 3 little words that may shoot effortlessly from the lip, sprayed with the ease of spittle or a teasing hint. Where does that simple lyric go when uttered? To the land of meaningless tosh, to live short and die with stale gossip, or flourish, sustaining lifelong work, lasting, bequeathed as a coffin companion. Some live by the sound of those words, contracted to their harmony. Others flaunt them like overinflated cash, buying worthless passion. Love creates jesters, sultans, and migrants, decodes high times and mockery. It is who we are, with it or without it. I will be spot on in its proposition. This is Sound of Recovery. I've never read this one out loud, actually. So, well, publicly. So, The Sound of Recovery. She generates a fracas, Aurora static, as infused as an overworked Geiger counter. Triggers a riot. She is my saving grace. Listen, I'm in recovery. So the next poem is called Eros in East Preston. I live in a village on the West Sussex coast called East Preston, and whilst writing my dissertation, I read quite a bit around the Greek gods and mythology, and I got smitten by Eros, and I just wondered what he's always going around making people fall in love. Maybe he needs some time off. So he's having a holiday in East Preston. Eros in East Preston. Hotshot talent wasted. Gut reactions, fragments of archaeology. His fable binds, unbinds, dangles by a fleece. He curses Apollo for leaving him suburban and wonders why. Hung up on deficit tall tales, time to skedaddle. He scatters his essence, congeals as out of sync archive. Soon a tourist, assuming the name Cupid, his preferred waggery. Secures lodgings at the Sea View Inn, overlooking shaggy dog parlour. In Tudor Rose, he enumerates orders in antique Greek. Barmaid attends. He recounts midsummer mischief, Egyptian queen and Roman soldier, hotheads in Verona, darts cast oblivious, arrow tips misaligned, tales of truth frayed, lies and brutality, the war in his helix. Tipsy, feeling the taxu, Eros hunts. Something of an odyssey here. Settles for sweet and sour chicken balls served exclusive as sacrifice. Suffite, epic, settling on shingle under cryptic clouds and heroic semicircle moon. He cites Socrates' marvelous lunacy, Plato's disdain. He acts out his famous Sappho tease and replays missing the target with Foucault. Spatters at Uranus, what was the fucking deal with Nietzsche? Back in his room, he listens to Littlehampton Friday night sirens, lays on ancient divan, his noodle like an illuminated globe, casts spinning thoughts way back to his parents, relives the contours of their love, the ultimate in pleasure and pain. He embraces his own spun-out anti-climax. Nothing alters. He lives his own impossible binding. This one's came about, again, partly is just some of the stuff that I read for my dissertation. It's called Ask the Boffins, Dreamers, Historians, and the Poets. Scientists tried to let it flourish in dishy mould, got in a whirl experimenting with DNA, found the true elements, but not the exact mix, distilled it, diluted data, got lost in taxonomy, discovered it has to be the real thing, cannot be replicated, and shyly published their findings without conclusion. The philosophers gathered and chatted each other up, ignoring Abelard. Plato held a symposium, Engels looked backwards. They took a long, hard Roycian look at their hearts, supposed something seminal. Grand statements proclaimed, eternal models offered, still to be fully understood. The historians inferred love by numbers, exhumed early signs, new kingdom love notes, damage smitten by ego, located myrtles in the foam, but excavated psyche, recorded 999 ships for Helen, traced Napoleonic foreign affairs back to Hippolyte, found proof of fairy tale romance. The poets tried, penned flowers, dickered cliche for metaphor, flapped angst touching images of lust, cried with joy, celebrated love lost, composing ever after. Here we go again. Postcard perfect. You promenade beside the ocean. I balance on a sea wall, view a picture postcard perfect. You saunter across the beach, walk my way. I want to be the warm sun on your bronze shoulders. I imagine myself nonchalant breeze, a satisfied sigh on your blushed cheek. I wish to be the yielding sand under your feet, and I long to be the trillions of tiny grains between your toes that you cannot help but take home. And this one's called Love. Is it really just a four-letter word? Is it not a kebab stick stuffed with emotion, hunger, verging on cannibalistic, a recipe with basic ingredients? It is sacrifice, worship, fundamental, blasphemous, followed by devout, spurned by agnostic, played with unheard prayers. It is ambivalent, imagined or for real, a caress, often forgotten, misplaced. Some do it by rote, a kiss. It is constructed, a maze with euphoria at its heart, the hook of 60s pop, unbelievably wet, windswept moors and feisty girls. You can read all about it. It may have reason, there is a rhyme, perhaps universal, tricky. It might be them, I am adamant it is us, but without you, I swear it has no meaning.
That was a beautiful reading, Darren. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurie.
And I mean, I've read these poems on the page, but I haven't heard you read them out loud, and it was, yeah, a completely new experience. I love them. Something that I wanted to ask you about, this isn't meant to catch you out at all, this is just something that like occurred to me whilst you were reading, which is, I mean, I've always noticed your love of mythology, which you mentioned, and I mean, I just find it interesting that you love that so much, but obviously back in the day you were never hugely keen on like the, as you said earlier, like the flowery Shakespeare sort of stuff. Like, what is it about mythology in particular that has appealed to you?
I just love the nonsense of it. I think I just like the way that the Greek gods existed and walked amongst humans, and on the, you know, they didn't hide away, they weren't, you know, hidden, and an unseen deity, they were there, they each had responsibility for different bits of life, so it wasn't just one person's call and everything. I think this, and the stories, the Greek myths are just great classic stories, that actually, if you, whichever translations you read, they're always entertaining. The other thing I like about them is the fact there are more, there's lots of translations that you can get, so you always get a slightly different take. And again, although secretly I'm not such a fan of his work anymore, but Simon Armitage, his translation of the Odyssey is fantastic. It's really great. It just brings it to life. And again, having read that, I then worked backwards and then went to more traditional versions of the Greek myths, and again just discovered this whole realm of Greek gods. And then currently reading the Stephen Fry reworkings of the myths and things, which brings a whole new take on it, and that, yeah, it just really appealed to me. I think it's amusing stuff, the Greek myths.
I like the idea of describing it as amusing. That I like that. And then something else I wondered, I mean, as you said, it was like originally titled, you said it was originally titled What is Love? Yeah. So like the first poem in the pamphlet. And I mean, it feels like a pamphlet of questions. Do you feel that you come to an answer by the end of the pamphlet, or are you still left questioning?
I'm not sure whether the pamphlet answers questions. The academic part of the dissertation answered the question I asked, which is what I meant to blokes. Without digging it out, I can't remember what I wrote because it's a couple of years ago. But I don't think it's meant to, the pamphlet's meant to answer questions. So I think it's about giving lots of different viewpoints on what love is and what it does to people. And this notion of a Greek god running around who's responsible for making people fall in love, I just find hugely amusing. That maybe Eros is there in the background, because sometimes you think about the people that some of us fall in love with and you just can't work out how and why people are together, but maybe Eros has a hand in it. And Eros features in more than one of the poems in the pamphlet. He makes a few appearances.
Oh, well, we will come back to your poetry in a bit, Darren, but it's time to head over to Matt and talk a little bit with you and hear a bit of your poetry. And Matt, I mean, if I've got my numbers right, you've released 2 collections, you've released 4 pamphlets, and you've got another collection on the way, which is, I've got it right. Okay, that is really impressive. I mean, that's a lot of poetry to be out in the world now. I wondered if you have any tricks of the trade, like any ingredients to the success of just releasing so much poetry.
Oh, that's a hard question.
I'm glad she asked you, Matt, and not me.
I think, yeah. I don't think there are any really tricks I can say, really. Apart, I'd say that travel for me has always been something that's made me. I get quite a lot of inspiration from meeting new people, going into different cultures, seeing different cities, and for some reason, if I'm in a different place, the poetry just seems to literally sort of pour out of me, more or less. Yeah, travel mainly, I'd say. And yeah, I don't think there are any. Can't really give any tips, I'm afraid.
Oh no, you're holding it secret. I see what you're doing. Keeping the tricks to yourself. So I mean, you say that travel, you often find that quite inspiring for your writing. Is there anything else in particular that tends to drive your writing, like any particular ideas or themes or experiences?
Yeah, I mean, each pamphlet obviously is different. Each collection is very different to the new collection that's due out sort of around Christmas time. There are travel poems, as there are travel poems in all collections, but this is a more, I think, visceral and quite highly political collection. More political than my previous stuff. So I think politics, love, myths, obviously, and people generally, I think are inspirations from me. Other poets also are inspirations. So yeah, I'd say that's about it really for that.
Okay, so in your first reading, we're going to hear a selection of poetry from your different publications.
Yeah.
I'll hand over to you.
Okay, so the first poem is quite an old poem now. It's included in Dystopia 3810, which is the first collection, and it's also in this beautiful anthology, Dear Dylan. So this was written after a weekend visiting the boathouse in Larne. This is called Larne. I woke in the birth of darkest morning, the sound of a pony's hooves scraping against granite, following the forest to a road of open borders, guarded by rooks that thread the castle remains. I walk the shield of black air, seals of light, like children jumping for a higher shelf, peeking bright pockets of sun, crowning the morning with the crispy repeats of dew. Reaching an ivy-smoldered cabin, windows smeared with an amber moss, writing desk leveled to a vista of trickling water, a pen cushioned in inkling ash. A morning in black hoods of cloud, where a moon lights up a castle like a cathedral. I saw discarded fishing wrecks sleeping in dribbles, simmered by a slow tide of blue and white sparks. So the next few poems are taken from Woodworm. And yes, as you can see, my ugly mug is on the front cover. So I'm going to read this one. So this one's called Tenderness. Drop a heart into a glass. Watch the glass start to expand. Place a lid or plate over its circular top. Hear the slowing beat pulsate. Allow oxygen to circulate. The heart will become an unripe cacti, fresh and cold, bulging in liquid with hairs and horns, a tenderness revealed to all. Show us that the moon is broken. Peel away the broken glass from the light that shatters. Place the brightness inside, where the repletion of the dark limps like a broken smile laid to rest. Show me the sunset, not the mouth, covering the concrete owl. The heart that lay in tenderness waits to escape. Watching a kingfisher puncturing surface, a slewed flicker of blue diving through watery brown curtains. Those moments submerged, falling through another world where time is slow and heavy. The brief and lost scenes are a vivid retreat, where each abyss we visit the sweet chorus. listen for a fleeting white wren that will guide us. And if wanting to be far, never caught by human eye, like those missing moments when I drowned as a boy and thick reeds pulling me under. A ship of small flames came waiting for me to ignite it, leading the navigator into a new world that I may watch and cower. Always be the shipmast, not the sails. Swim underneath the wreck, be not that lifeless body that floats on the surface. Rotting wood where worms like to sleep. Think and act as every eye would. Be that watchful kingfisher puncturing surface, a slewed flicker of blue. Okay, so this next poem is about the orator of the Peterloo Massacre. So I had to get political. And some people ask me, so why, Matt? Why'd you write about history? Well, so we don't bloody forget it, really. So this is called The Orator of Peterloo. The orator travelled the length of the land through bare cornfield to busy city street, kicking sand into the face of the landowner. Repeal these laws of mercantilism and allow small and broken mouths to feed and eat. Do not let this highly taxed trade be our prison. Wavering pools topped with the red cap of liberty. The ear of a nation gathered to listen to a man who wants to blind the parliamentary horse, giving every man and woman the right of voice. Not lost inside a crowd, the vision of an eye that directs the government's sight. The orator saw bones in red mud, a shrill from daughter to mother, fists and shrugs of the disempowered, stealing breadcrumbs from their neighbors. The banners held high read of reform, equal representation and love. Words delivered that day echo how we all feel as we heard the sound of long blades withdrawing and the hussars approached on horseback, preparing for the final charge, murdering children, men and women, as the orator's words could not stop the unfolding of this bloody, mindless slaughter. I'm going to read this one, Lament. Now, this was written for a dear friend of mine who passed away a couple of years ago, a few years ago, actually. I got to meet him. He's a fantastic poet, lovely guy called Greg. And I met him in Boston, and I did a reading in Boston, and he was an absolute inspiration to me and helped me through a lot. So this is for Greg. This is called Lament. Don't replace the same armor where open wounds are healed by breath, not medicine. Take an orchid as soft as a pillow and sleep in the secret garden among fresh opiates. Rest well, my friend, where the sun hacks the rainbow into quarters, and catch the thief who unthreads such old wounds. Please do leave those promises at the door, as time will heal all the spaces that are left behind. I heard you read in an armory in Massachusetts. We shared a smoke outside along avenues of painted white wood, picket fences, square porches. We discussed the eternal and those elements of inertia over drinks and nachos. Rest well, my friend, where the sun hacks the rainbow into quarters. Leave the light to burn until the smell of gasoline no longer lingers. Wave goodbye to the road that was once broken, disjointed. Sleep well, my friend, and may the guardians hold and guide you. Okay, so I'll finish with one from, this is a poem that was from The Kingdom. This is a pamphlet and was published in Into the Void. I don't very often get poems in Into the Void, so I was quite pleased to get this one in. So this is Sleeping Inside a Lung of Black Tulips. It was such a strange feeling, like being awake in half a dream. walking from my local doctor's surgery, having been told that I no longer had a heart. The beat had faded, lungs had ceased, just black tulips sleeping among the dust of a glimpse. And that iron temple that I once trusted had several cracks, which I left unrepaired when the holes started to grow. Eyes like stilts of rugged skin began to see once again. Come draw my face in sand, and they'll only hide it with blue and yellow beach towels, a stream of rented out sun loungers placed in the sun. Drain the blood from the outline of my chin, where the ocean will refuse to wash away my image as I remain under the sand and the ink that built me. Far from the perfect butcher's cut, place my tattered spine among scorched oak and apple-scented candles, and clear the flower stems from attics of broken Christmas trees. Read old love letters, coated in mildew, written in blue, stashed and smeared with a yellow moss. Each morning wake to the sun as birds sing louder than usual, as days had grown dark and thin.
A real round of applause. Matt, that was so, I mean, it was beautifully read, and the poetry was gorgeous. I have to say, you have a real talent at crafting imagery beautifully. Each image is like a portal into its own world. It's really amazing. I mean, the poem Tenderness in particular, like that stands out for me. I think it's gorgeous. So thank you so much.
I love Tenderness.
Yeah.
Tenderness is one of my favorite poems by anyone. It's incredible. I love it.
I agree.
Thanks, mate.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that I thought of when I was listening to you read the poems was that there's quite a lot of imagery around like castles and battle and armies, and I think in one poem you mentioned gun turrets and American tanks, and I wondered where this imagery comes from in particular. Like why does it come up so much in your work?
I think the gun turrets, that comes from a poem called The Lee, which was about Torcross, and there's a gun turret on top of the hill. That's probably why I mentioned that. Castles, I do mention, depending, again, it's about place and times and things like that. But imagery is one that I love to play with imagery. And I love to see imagery in a poem, to be honest with you. And I like to work out the image itself. And that's what I find fascinating in poetry, especially more imagery-based poetry. It's the image that you see, and it takes your imagination to take you away for a while and to salvage that shape of an image out. And I've always been obsessed with art and surrealism, and obviously imagery and writing as well.
That definitely comes across in your writing. I mean, as I said, the imagery that you use is always so intricate and so complex. You can tell there's been a lot of thought behind it. You said a couple of times now that your writing is very often political, and I think this probably applies to both of you. I wondered how you find that the poems that are political, how you often find they are received. And that isn't necessarily whether it should or shouldn't be received in a certain way, but how do you think that audiences usually react to your poems that are political?
It depends if they're left wing or right wing, I think.
True, you got to pick your audience.
Yeah, I think I've been lucky that all the ones that I've read, either on Zoom or in a pub, most of the people in the room are like-minded, so I've got away with it. It's been very not very often there's been anyone of the other persuasion politically in the room. And we held a flight of the Dragonflies the night before the general election, and yeah, everybody in the room was going to be voting the same way. I'll let you work out which way that might have been, but everybody in the room was going to be voting the same way. So yeah, I think it's, as Matt says, it depends on the persuasion of the folk in the room.
Do you find it risky? I guess it's, as you say, poetry has to be political, so it's important that it makes a statement, or poetry can be political if you want it to be. So yeah, I guess that's the aim, is you're taking a stand. It's just, oh, sorry, you're going to say something, Matt.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. I think politics should be written about. So you can't just sweep everything under the carpet, you know, and whether you're right wing, left wing, or middle of the road, or central, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of our life. It's part of, you know, our thinking and everything else. So we need to, you know, obviously engage with politics. And my way of doing it is to obviously, I like to write things from the past. So I've written about, obviously, the poem of the Orator of Peterloo. So I've written about that. I've written about the Great Riot of Bristol, about the slave trade in Bristol as well. So these are all sort of political emotions. And the reason why I like to write about certain things of history is there are some people that I come across that read and pick up my books. I've never come across certain episodes in history that happen.
Oh, really? So they kind of have an educational aspect to them in a way.
Yeah, so a lot of American poets that have picked up books by me have never heard of the Great Riot of Bristol, never heard of Peterloo and what happened. So it's if anything, it's quite educational for people to sort of, you know, to find out more about their own history. And I think, you know, I'm going to keep bringing up these radical little bits from our history, which are embarrassing. And I need to write about them. And I think other people should as well. You can't just, you know, cancel it completely. You need to take this on board. And yes, I will. I know I do upset people, but you know.
I like what you say though about, you know, not sweeping things under the carpet. Like there is no point in pretending that things don't exist. The best thing to do is like talk about things. Yeah.
Debate. I mean, healthy debate is good. You know, not on social media because it always ends up turning everyone telling each other to F off and all the rest of it. But I mean, generally, you know, if you're a face-to-face meeting with somebody, you can have a reasonable debate with somebody, whether they're right wing or left wing, without it turning into fisticuffs.
Yeah.
Just to have a proper, healthy debate. And it's interesting to listen to other people's opinions. You know, I have friends that are Labour supporters. I have friends that are Liberals. I have friends that are Green. It's good to talk about these things, and we need to talk about these things. Sorry if I'm ranting on.
No, I'm glad that you are talking about these things. And okay, I think we're going to head over to Darren's second reading now. So thank you, Matt. Darren, this is going to be from, I mean, it's a mix of Machinery of Life and Never Mind the Couplets, which is your forthcoming collection. When can we expect to see Never Mind the Couplets coming out into the world?
Well, I'm hoping it'll be early 2022. There's a slight delay for a number of reasons. But yeah, I'm hoping early 2022 it will see the light of day.
Okay, everyone keep your eyes peeled for that. And I will let the poems speak for themselves and let you do your second reading.
Thanks, Rory. I'm going to do a couple more from the Machinery of Life first. So this one is called How Many Times Can I Say It? Stuck on an extra long solo venture, alternating opposing opinions. Stay in my silo versus hanging out in cattle markets. Until I heard your music, I interrupted your singing. Is your halo velvet? You put down your cello, vexed, slowly removed pink silk gloves, face full of smirk. My heart pumped blood through jello veins. I quaked in a voice reserved for gods. Yes, Apollo verbals. Hello, Venus, I thundered, my voice amplified, roaring in a speeding tremolo vehicle. My confidence increased, jam-packed with desire. I sputtered the full weight of my kilo verse. You flounced over, gliding as if in a pedalo vessel. Gave me the once over, a gigolo vetted. You grinned, my head span, we embraced. A clincher, we dated, frequented finest bordello venues, drank cheap wine, ate exotic food, tomatillo vegan stew. We swapped tokens. You bought me a polo vest. I knitted you an itchy wool pullover. We leapt. Now I'm evolving. A pig in clover. This one's called Twister. When our paths thwacked into one another, I tumbled, consumed by a tornado. Like Dorothy, I found myself swept along to an alternate place. I caught myself pondering, I must be brainless, nothing makes sense, and if only I could locate my heart, but you whipped it away. and I wish I had the courage to take you by the hand, drag you home. You gleamed bright like rubies and emeralds, glinting in the glory of a straw hat morning. I was your pretty, love developed, everything became clear. Blemish and edit, black and white, you and me, polychromatic. So I will read a few from Never Mind the Couplets. This is called The Poet Receives the Ultimate Rejection. I was enveloped in perfect uncertainty, falling after first view, under the influence, caressed by the caprice of Cupid's creativity. I scripted my soul on sheets of floral paper, page after page of perfectly crafted romance, bouquets of smoochy alliteration. My bursting heart spilled streams of stanzas, floods of verse, dreams of desire written in words of warmth, fondness demonstrated in the lexicon of love. I submitted my primal cravings, went public, keenness exhibited at nights of spoken word, and saw my passion proclaimed and published. Vibrant sentiment refused to take prisoners, a daredevil mission to capture her feelings, elegies for her, the ultimate proposition. Kapow! She poo-pooed my poetry, drenched my score with scorn, ripped the man from my manuscript, wishful words wasted, lost. I imagined myself a mythomane. As a result, I can no longer say, or write, or, but I can type the word heartbreak, and I can spell out W-E-E-P, and I still her. This next one is called English Scheme. I'm not sure this has maybe a political tint to it. I don't know. You make your mind up. Matt might tell us afterwards. Even in England, there are some castles and cottages with no cows, but there's still a flourishing clotted cream industry. Steeplejacks trade high tea, sozzles students steal cones, ecstatic ravers pause the come down. Real estate agents offer high commission and cheap fake wisdom. Low rent tenants practice muted espionage. Old spies offer little, a dying breed. James Bond phones in sick. Money pennies his pimp. Lady Godiva is a 5 ways big top dealer cracking jokes straight from the line tamer's mouth. Dower doormen have lost their bounce. It's common. My local MP is a remnant, with the wit and brain power of 24 tins of corned beef. The House of Lords is packed with dusty, slippery shapeshifters wearing counterfeit halos. The ghost of community wails and waves at flagging spirits. There is a certified chink in the armour. Woodhicks love the smell of Brasso, while the royals know how not to inhale. A gaggle of bank holidays grope around Brighton Beach. Poor old Blackpool fails to illuminate, but still puts on a glitzy show. Bad landlords offer Sunday lunch fatherly advice to lame disco daddies. Wicker picnic hampers offer no shelter. The future is as tantalising as a curly 11th hour spam sandwich. Fireside phantoms chase memories down too many back streets, countless washed out lanes, dead ends, dead heads. This next one is political. I've decided to change my running order and I've decided to read this one. This one first appeared in the Morning Star and it's called Are You a Young Person? The Department of No Jobs and Pitiful Pensions would like to invite you to attend unavoidable 7 days a week, 52 weeks every year, demoralisation training. You will learn all about lack of opportunity, be well prepared for living at home forever, or get the life-changing chance of relocating onto the streets. Flat-coloured specialists from the uncivil service will offer a priceless new brand of IAG. Misaligned information, horizontal advice, pumice stone guidance. Hand out nondescript instructions to write a uniform curriculum vitae full of forlorn hope. Demonstrate the rhythm method of smoke and broken mirror hand claps and the beat of deceit. repeatedly remind you it's all about mastery in 21st century capitalist control, where elite cronies sell 1 in 1,000 possibilities of dead-end jobs and peddle the dream of lucky old you, 40 years down the line, riddled with malignant drudgery. This next one is called WMKC. Rocking on Plimsoll hills, shoulders bouncing off Victorian brickwork. Small hands squeeze cold panda pop. Lips leave cheese and onion on bright pink bendy plastic straw, and silver jubilee sun keeps the excitement bubbling. Each time the door opens, a miasma of fusty tobacco smoke tries to get away. I sneak a peek at nylon fashion and semi-permanent hair. I catch the tremolo say-so tongue of the bingo master proclaiming the short-lived appearance of diminutive ducks and overweight ladies. Saturday night, the walls will leak disco beats, rock and roll bass, or sing-along rod. Sunday drinks, the last drop of hard graft wages with fingers crossed for meat raffle numbers. This drop of memory still splashes from time to time. How I miss the working men's kids club. And I'll finish with a poem. I haven't entered many competitions in my time. Most of the time I never hear back. But this one was highly recommended in the Penthro Poetry Book Prize in 2019, I think. And it's called Sugarland. Welcome to Sugarland, home of the society of beer drinking ladies and us, where we live toe to toe, always on the brink, balanced like a brace of raindrips on the tilt of a fern leaf, a sun split from tipping point, always fancy dancing, pussyfooting, prancing around each other, testing the waters of our halcyon wells. When we kiss, my teeth itch. I taste catnip and fake fur. There is a word for this experience. It sits neatly in cozy isolation on the list of my tongue, like bootleg spice, and I cannot seem to snitch it away. When we embrace, I feel the weight of dungeon fresh, heavyweight chains that hold no missing link. When we tumble together, roll in our bones, hard-boiled and pornographic scent, our skirmish eventually comes up snake eyes. This is Sugarland, a Woodhouse gaslight, an anchor point, our Berlin bunker, home of a barely anonymous, almost distinguished troop of wayward females and lovely lushes. Hello, my name is. Thanks, Rory.
Brilliant, thank you, Darren.
Oh, loving those new poems, Darren.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, Matt. Cheers.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, I love Never Mind the Couplets because it's a lovely amalgamation of lots of different ideas. And I mean, you said at one point you were like, oh, I don't know if this poem is political, or and there's like the last time I saw it, there was a section about, you know, saying I'm not political and then going on a little political sort of rant in a way. And it's got lovely sort of nostalgic poems, and it's got more like love poems. I think it's a wonderful amalgamation of lots of poetry. What in particular, like there's one section that is quite nostalgic, and you read from it, the Working Men's Kids Club. Why were you so interested in looking back to this time? Because you look back to childhood sometimes and look back to these memories and your family from that time. What drew you to that era?
I'm not sure. I think the 1970s, being a kid in the 1970s, was great fun. Long hot summers, very simple life. Although when I do look back and what I now know and about it, you know, there was times of long unemployment for my dad and several redundancies, and you know, times were hard for the country as a whole. Again, without getting too political there about what the 1970s were like, but you know, for me, you know, it was great fun. It was, you know, long summer nights running around the streets, playing, just out all the time. You know, TV we didn't do TV. You know, we were out and about and running around. And I don't know where it came from. I just well, what WNKC came about because I set myself a task of writing poems using the titles of songs by The Fall. So I started with and I did their first 4 albums, and it was WMC is one of the titles, and for some reason I wrote that using that as the title, but then decided I need to put the K in just to make it the Working Men's Kids Club. And then I just some ideas, some thoughts of childhood popped into my head. I wanted to write a poem about my mother, not my mother, sorry, my grandmother. So there's a poem about my grandmother in there. There's a poem about starting secondary school and the impact that had on my life. Yeah, and it was just nice to reminisce a little bit. I don't want to do it too often or do it too much, but it was quite nice to do a little bit of it.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, I think we should head over to Matt's final reading now, but thank you so much for that taster of Never Mind the Couplets. I hope that everyone at home is going to keep their eyes open for when it does come out next year and get themselves a copy.
Thank you, Florrie.
Matt, okay, so for your second reading, you will be reading from Everyone is Waiting for Tomorrow. It's had, I mean, I've been reading up online, it's had some amazing reviews. Could you tell us a little bit about it before we hear you read from it?
Yep, it's a collection of 50 poems written over the last 2 years. So I like to think of it with COVID. Obviously, I like to think of it as a diary of the last 18 months, really. So it's some personal stuff. Obviously, there's some political stuff. There's stuff about the pandemic. But I also found that while I was in lockdown, I did a lot of soul searching and looking back, reflecting on my own life. And like Darren, with childhood and things like that. So there are poems about growing up in the 80s. There's a poem also about 34 years after the film poem V, to see what has changed in those 34 years. It's quite a long poem, that one.
Let's hear the other poems that you've got.
Okay, right. So I'm going to start then, read you some poems from the new book. I haven't read any of these yet. So you're in for something. So this is a poem called Caerleon. Caerleon's a place not too close to me. It's about a 10-minute walk from me. And I moved to Wales 2 years ago at the end of this month. And Tennyson used to go to, he stayed in a pub in Caerleon, and that's where he wrote Idylls of the King. So this is called Caerleon. Iron hills where children play 2 meters apart, in ruins of myth and fact, between green half towers and Roman scrolls. I drink from flowers recently watered, hear trees, the forest belch, a thread vision onto the river Usk, where empty windows fill a local inn. A plague seeps in cracks and whispers, and we step inside the idylls of the king. It was only in bare delights of day, beneath the sun, reflecting from willows, a glimpse, Geoffrey of Monmouth, standing at a round table covered with grass. Hell, king, tomorrow we will all pass away. For if we breathe this wandering air, what knight or angel dare speak for us today? Okay, so the next one, I'm afraid, is about COVID. It's called Outbreak and is included in Ambit. What did you do during the outbreak, son? I carried the dead and infected day after day, bed to bed, slab to slab, body after body, until the locusts came. England's rose is withering, Dad, for I'm the witness of no prevention. Wuhan to Madrid fell to the mast, and they believed that the rose of England would never be affected. though the butchers formed a petticoat excuse, and we all fell behind the mask. Her petals turned a putrid black. Isn't it sickening, Dad? Watching the sun through a glass window after winter had reigned for 92 days. We social distance ourselves, heard the latest death count on the news last night. We could see the great toilet roll scandal of 2020 unfolding. Local politicians made a tidy sum, large investments for a new bacterial super spray. And if we ever resurfaced our bodies, would they be augmented, an advanced upgrade, 2 extra holes placed for that second pair of eyes, oval-shaped mirrors sewn into the soles of our feet, where we walk in woodlands at midnight, barefoot along grasslands, where ghosts stirred in our sleep. How might the world end for us? Would we become thirsty silverfish, living underneath cracked piping? In a world above our shrinking heads, absence of light and movement, our nature broken, mutated, underneath mother's breaking surface. What did you do during the outbreak, son? I carried the dead and infected day after day, bed to bed, slab on slab, body after body, until the locusts came. Okay, so the next poem is a poem which is about to be published in Poetry Salzburg Review, and is a poem about climate change, and it's called Black Sun. Let us stare deep and long. Only a black sun will return its gaze, an oath to the world written on the back of forests. Tongues in stone inside eyes and lips of snakes, where no mortals roam. Throw arrows in silver and gold. Our wisdom is a detached cloak, its envy inscribed in the secret whispers from strangers. Spear of mistletoe, sharpened and coiled, head a triangle, murdering a god. For when a mother must plead, everything must weep once for her son. Mother is resting. Her earth remains quiet. We are in hiding. Burial is the soil we dig, and our beings the ghost of a planet. For if earth can rest with no human interference, may our mother bring prayer, redirect the hydra of flood and famine, casting spells to earthlings. We will become the salt that floats, a planet of water, an Atlantis below our feet. Okay, so now we're going to go back in history a little bit, and this is a poem about growing up in the 1980s. This is called The Year We Watched the Berlin Wall Topple. Stepping over the outline of sleeping baby skinheads, scattered under railway lines, glue sniffed on cycle tracks, in quarries that run a green long neck, over bent rugby posts, signed with velvet arrows and love hearts. In an age of Chernobyl and Thatcher, where girls grew fists and boys wore makeup, in a time when Pinochet murdered Narada, we'll watch the Berlin Wall topple on BBC in full Technicolor. We slept in bright wallpapered, bright luminous rooms, where our youth had felt like a diary written on strong prescription and hallucinating drugs. Now we watch time, the crow lines from a broken face, on screens as large as hallway mirrors. And the next poem is a poem about dementia. This is a poem from my dad. This is a prose poem called A Poem for Dad. During days that fell into the same, the sun a mirror, its glass inside an eye wide shut, I found a field, oak trunk tethered between long greys and snake-shaped lines of mown grass. 2 pylons stretched out on the backyard of sky, where a pitch for pondering crows shifts the green landscape. Into lethargy, below a grass tump, I see 3 small boys playing football with their dad. A brown fleece and a baseball cap laid out for goalposts. Hat trick in 18 seconds for dad. It was during my time in isolation that I realized that I was losing mine. It brought back days long ago in quarries where my dad never missed a single tackle. Now a partitioned world divided us both, where I lived in a house with different pictures and my family portraits taken at a varying angle, though the source of print is the same, as a house that is lost in the mind of a man that thinks he lives somewhere else. Okay, so back to the pandemic. And this is a poem, this was published in the journal. This is called Kindness in an Age of Pestilence. And this was written at the beginning of the outbreak, if you like. This is Kindness in the Age of Pestilence. When the theatre went dark, the stage a fence of glass without an audience, forming masses blissfully paranoid, stocking supplies in double-locked garages. Keep me well and far from breaths of pestilence, far from infections in hospitals, and far from the performing pantomime horse, who breathed Darwin's virus on the weak, between cracks of shameless promotions of death and profit. I wash my hands from the blood of government. I seek only kindness from strangers and those who remember how and what it is to be human. Okay, so I'm going to finish now the last poem. This is a poem, again, this is a poem about climate. This is about the bleaching of our oceans. This is called The Bleaching. God became an octopus for a year, erased all of the color from coral, turning bright algae into Neptune's trees, bleaching our carbon sink into a black and white seafloor. Warming blue oceans, lips of oil and boiled coves. And my arms challenge the sea into weights of serpentine, and those faces with tongues, silent and talking. They say a lot, yet say nothing that stimulates. And that's when I start to feel like Vincent Vega driving down a highway in Pulp Fiction. Every distraction's a personal fabrication. It's as if envy in truth were a small bird digitalized into a beast without human functions. For what becomes the truth will be held behind windows with bars. Watch a red moon roll it along black oceans, and beneath feet to our watery bed. An abandoned ruin, no text or color. Deniers see clearly through glass, and their arms grasp for sour refusals.
Thank you, Matt. A fantastic reading, and I love to hear the poems on the climate crisis as well. Black Sun in particular, I thought is brilliant. Yeah, that was a fantastic reading. I mean, one poem that really stuck out to me, and I'm sure it will for many people watching too, was a poem for Dad, which I thought was stunning. And on the poem, there's a note saying that he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when it was during lockdown. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I can only imagine how difficult that must have been to deal with. Was the collection almost a way to sort of work through that in a way?
Yeah, I think it started with that. And well, it started with the pandemic, and then it's been one thing after another, really.
Yeah.
So there is poems about my dad, obviously with dementia, He's still at home. I spend a lot of my time now going to Bristol and living in Wales at the same time. So I spend a lot of time helping my mum. Obviously, he's coming to a stage now where we're going to have to get some care in, I think, before he has to go to a place, a care home or a nursing home. But it has been very hard, over the lockdown period.
Yeah, definitely. Of all times, that, I mean, the isolation of lockdown has been a tricky thing for many people, and in those circumstances, I imagine it must have been really difficult. A beautiful poem about it, though, definitely. And also, speaking of the pandemic, you said that earlier that it's been a time where you've been able to think quite a lot and have a lot of introspection. How has that played out with your writing practice? Lots of time thinking doesn't necessarily mean lots of time actually getting poems down. Do you think it helped in any way or not?
Yeah, I think it has. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time walking and sort of exercising and things like that, so that helps quite a lot, especially where I'm living. There's lots of open spaces, which is quite nice. But I do think that I've had time to reflect on lots of things over the last 18 months, and it's helped build this collection. I mean, the collection has gone through, I think, about 125 different versions.
That is a lot. Wow.
Now, yeah, I'm really, really, really happy with it now, and I can't wait for people, to start reading it. But yeah, no, I think lockdown has helped a hell of a lot for my creative juices, if you know.
Yeah, it would make sense. Thank you so much, Matt, and I've loved hearing from everyone is waiting for tomorrow. Again, it's another one for everyone who's watching at home to keep an eye out and look for when it's out to buy in the world. Thank you so much, Matt and Darren, for your fantastic readings, your beautiful poetry. There's one last question that I have for both of you before we do finish this Meet the Poet, which is, well, it's more, I want to give you the opportunity to offer a shout out to any of the poets out there, any poets, just maybe one who has inspired you, a poet who you've recently discovered and want to let other people know about, or if it's just your favorite poet. I wanted to give you the floor to just give a shout out to someone. I see Darren's got an idea. It's probably searching for a book. Matt, do you have anyone that you want to shout out?
I say Anthony Owens. I'd say he's a really good poet. Really respect Anthony for what he does. Again, he's got a political poet. He's a good guy. He's one of the people that are down to earth. He's not got his head stuffed up his ass like some people. And he's a really, really good poet. And I think Poetry, the pamphlet I got from him, is a really, really good pamphlet. Definitely worth. And I'm looking forward to his new collection as well, which is called The Battle, which will be out next year, of which I've commented on, and there'll be something from me in that as well. So. But yes.
Cool. And how about you, Darren?
Well, I second that. Yeah, definitely second that. Tom McCall is great. His collection, Grenade Genie, is brilliant, and that's quite political. Tom's a really good poet. I just disappeared over to the bookshelf to get the book I bought recently, which is Caleb Femi's Poor.
Yeah.
Absolutely awesome. One of the best things I've read for a very long time. It's just absolutely brilliant. So I recommend that as a book, and Tom McCall. But there are just so many great poets out there who are in the smaller poetry presses being published by not the big name publishers. There are so many to choose from. If I could probably fill half an hour rattling off names of great poets that I've read over the last couple of years from small poetry presses. There's a lot of good poets out there at the moment.
I got one more.
Oh, please do. Please
Go on,
hang on. Let me
we'll
just
be here all night.
This one.
Kent Johnson. Tell us about Kent Johnson.
It's called All because of poetry, I have a very big house. So it's, how can I say this? It takes the piss a little bit. It takes the piss out of, I'd say, page and performance at the same time. But it's more to do about the established presses and the amount of nepotism that goes on within certain presses, etc. So, but it's hilarious, absolutely hilarious.
Oh, this is great. I think we've got 4 recommendations now. So everyone watching at home definitely has some, this is like homework, has some reading up to do after this Meet the Poet. There's reading to be done. Great shout outs. Well, thank you both so much for joining me on Meet the Poet. I've had such a good time chatting with you both. It's been a pleasure. So thank you so much, Matt and Darren. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in at home. I'm so pleased that you watched along. You can be notified about all future poetry events like these if you sign up to the Homestage poetry mailing list, which will be linked down below. There's lots going on at Homestage that you'll want to be kept up to date on. You can also follow us on TikTok and Twitter and Instagram at Homestage Poetry. And of course, do please drop us a like, maybe subscribe to our Facebook and YouTube channels, and leave a comment for Darren and Matt. I'm sure that they would love to answer any questions that you have about their poetry. And one last thing, at Homestage, we're running a folk music, poetry and the environment programme, where we're going to be airing all of your folk songs and poems that confront the climate crisis on our weekly show. Then the most popular entries, the composers will have the opportunity to go on tour and perform at a climate crisis festival. There's lots in it for you. It's a really great opportunity and we would love to hear your work. So do please get involved. Again, links in the description below. That is all from me for now, but I hope to see you next time. Take care.